So Furious 7 was directed by James Wan and it stars Vin Diesel, Paul Walker, Michelle Rodriguez, Jordana Brewster, Tyrese Gibson, Ludacris, Dwayne Johnson, as well as some newcomers, including Jason Statham as the new villain and Kurt Russell as a new person who recruits Dom and his crew to be secret agents, essentially. So Furious 7 is about when Jason Statham, who plays the brother of the villain from Fast and Furious 6, comes in, kills Han, and threatens Dom and his life and his family and such. They have to go after him and basically take care of him, make sure he doesn't do anything wrong. And also at the same time, Brian is thinking about moving on from all this stuff that he's been doing with his life for the past several years and just moving on. So this was a movie that I remember being really intrigued by when it was coming out. First off, it was directed by James Wan, who he previously only directed horror movies at this point, like the first Saw movie, the first two Conjuring movies, as well as the first Insidious movie, first and second Insidious movie, I forgot. And I was kind of curious to see how he would handle a movie like Fast and Furious, and also with the factor of the tragic passing of Paul Walker. He died during production of this movie. And I was curious to see like how they were going to send him off. How are they going to have his character in the movie, despite the fact that he was no longer with us, unfortunately. And this was a movie that I enjoyed the first time I saw it. Watching it this time, I still enjoyed it for the most part. And I definitely think it's in my top 3 of the Fast and Furious movies overall. So what do I enjoy in the movie? Well, notice off from the beginning, I kind of felt like there was a different feel from all the other movies. Like the style's a little bit different than any of the other movies. And I feel like James Wan kind of like added a bunch of like stuff to this movie that it's like he kind of added his own flair to it, but at the same time kind of stayed like in line with the rest of the Fast and Furious movies. So that way I just feel like, he did his homework. Like he actually knew what kind of movie he was going to do. Overall, definitely feels fun overall. Like the banter between the crew is really good and the action it's passable, it's decent enough, and it never goes over the top or really ridiculous and to the point where you're just questioning it like Fast and Furious 6 or Fast and Furious 8 or Fast and Furious 9. Too many Fast and Furious movies, just they need to end. And also, again, the bond between the cast is usually what makes these movies decent. Like, the bond between them I think, is a little bit different this time because, obviously, the circumstances around this movie, you can definitely tell that they definitely feel a little bit off a bit, but I think that's kind of the point with this movie because they were dealing with a lot at the time when they were trying to film this, and I have to commend them for going through with this movie and finishing out and just sending, Brian off in this fashion. And I also think the tribute to Paul Walker is actually very well done. Like, from all accounts, I heard he was a very nice guy and he was just, a good friend and just a good person in general. And his passing was obviously very upsetting because, like, he was very young and he left a young daughter at the time, I think. And I definitely felt like the tribute to him was definitely very moving and it definitely was very special. You can definitely tell that they had he and the rest of the cast and crew had like a special bond with him, and it definitely is emotional and impactful. Even if he's not there, like we still feel him there. I just feel like it does work overall. So, is there anything about this movie that I don't care for? Now, despite the fact that obviously, given the circumstances and how they handled Brian O'Connor's exit and everything, the stand-ins in the movie kind of look awkward upon a rewatch. Like, you definitely notice a lot of things in this movie, like they don't actually show Brian's head, they just show his body. And obviously, like, they kind of have, like, his face dimmed at times. You can definitely tell that they were trying to hide that, Paul Walker wasn't there, unfortunately. And, I don't know, maybe back then it looked fine, but, like, now it just kind of looks odd. I don't want to be mean or anything, because I heard, like, they were very impacted by what had happened, and this definitely was the best solution that they could come up with. And I don't know, maybe to me now it just kind of looks a bit off. Also, I didn't really like some of the cameos in this movie. There are a few cameos in this movie where, like, why are they even in this movie? Like, why was Iggy Azalea in this movie? Why was DJ Khaled in this movie? No, it wasn't DJ Khaled, it was T-Pain in this movie. Why was T-Pain in this movie? I don't know why. I felt like they shouldn't have had cameos just out of respect for, Walker and his family and everything. I just felt like it was a bit of a distraction. And also, I was kind of disappointed in some of the characters in this movie, particularly Dwayne Johnson. Like, he was a pretty good actor. He did a pretty good job in Fast 5 and Fast 6. Here, he's kind of sidelined, and I don't know if it's because, like, he had a bunch of projects that he was working on at the time, and that's why he's not in this movie as much. Like, he only appears in the beginning, he's attacked, and he's out in the hospital for the duration of the movie until the finale. Okay. Also, Jason Statham, surprisingly, when he's on screen, he's decent, but there's not enough of him in this movie. At least, you know, when we get to Hobbs and Shaw, I completely forgot Hobbs and Shaw was a movie. At least we'll get to see more of Jason Statham in this franchise. Also, Jordana Brewster, I thought she didn't really have much to do in this movie either. I felt like, you know, given the fact that she's supposed to be Brian O'Connor's love interest in this movie, you'd think she would have a little bit more to do in this movie. But she doesn't, unfortunately. And also, there are a couple storylines in this movie that I felt like were just kind of dropped overall. Like, Letty's memory is slowly coming back. It's kind of like infrequently placed throughout the entire movie. And I just felt like they could have done a little bit more with that. Or maybe they could have just scrapped it entirely. But overall, Furious 7, I think only works because it definitely has that tribute to Walker in it. And I do feel like the cast and crew did a really good job of, you know, honoring his memory. And I do think the bond between the stars is really good. And also the action is entertaining. It's fun. And I do think even though despite the heavy cloud that was like over this movie, they definitely managed to do a fun, action-packed movie that was very sweet in its tribute. And even though some things were just distracting, like cameos and the stand-ins, and also the use of some of the characters and the drop storylines, this is definitely one of the better Fast and Furious movies in general, in my opinion. I'll give it 3 out of 4 stars. See it. So, what's your favorite movie starring Paul Walker? Considering this was one of his last movies. Comment down below, subscribe to the channel. This is Pat. Stay safe.